I never imagined that the people who shared half my blood could be so cruel. The day my father passed away, I expected grief, maybe anger, but not betrayal this sharp. My half-brothers, Michael and Jason, didn't even show up to say goodbye. Not a word, not a glance, not a single flower. Instead, I was left alone with grief, carrying my father's ashes and a hollow silence. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. By the next morning, the messages started flooding in, demands for their share of my father's $850,000 trust. You can't make decisions without us. The money belongs to all of us. The audacity burned hotter than any anger I had ever felt. They had missed the funeral, disrespected our father, and now they had the nerve to talk about inheritance. I looked at the papers on my father's desk, emails, receipts, letters, and notes he'd kept for years. Every secret, every warning he had left was here. And suddenly, a plan formed in my mind. If they thought they could cheat me, they were about to learn a lesson in patience, proof, and quiet revenge. I would not just protect what was mine, I would make them regret underestimating me. After the shock of their audacity, I knew I couldn't act impulsively. Anger alone wouldn't win this battle. I needed proof, evidence that would show everyone the truth, that Michael and Jason had no respect for our father, and no right to his money. I started digging through his office, scanning letters, emails, and journals. My father had been meticulous, leaving behind reminders of his wishes and warnings about their selfishness. One folder caught my eye. Receipts for funeral expenses he had quietly paid for, copies of letters addressed to them about his trust, even a video of a conversation where he expressed his disappointment in their behavior. Each piece was a dagger in disguise, a record of the disrespect and greed that had defined them. I photographed everything, organized it chronologically, and started drafting notes. Every email, every demand they had sent, was stored. I realized the power of patience. They had underestimated me, they thought I would cry, plead, or surrender. Instead, I was building a case, a narrative, a path for revenge that would leave them speechless. Love revenge stories? Subscribe now. We drop new ones every week, raw, emotional, and full of justice. Don't miss the next chapter. They might have skipped the funeral, but I would make sure no one could ignore their betrayal, and the truth would come with consequences. The next morning, I felt a quiet satisfaction as I reviewed everything I had collected. Michael and Jason thought they were untouchable, but I held the receipts, the emails, and my father's recorded words. I decided to test the waters with a subtle move, one that would sting but not reveal my full hand. I contacted the law firm handling the trust, using a carefully worded email. I reminded them that I had evidence of the brothers' absence from the funeral and of their repeated demands. I requested confirmation that all steps regarding the inheritance would follow my father's instructions exactly. I didn't mention the full trove of proof yet. I wanted them to feel the tension, the possibility that everything could be exposed. Meanwhile, I sent a polite note to close family, mentioning the brothers' absence and their premature claims on the trust. The whispers began. Relatives who had once smiled and nodded at their charms started asking questions. By lunchtime, I received a subtle reply from the law firm. We are reviewing all documents carefully. That was all, but it was enough. The first ripple of doubt, the first crack in their arrogance, had appeared. And I was just getting started. I knew the brothers were arrogant, thinking they could intimidate anyone. Their calls started coming, Michael demanding updates, Jason insisting I hurry things along. I answered calmly, never betraying the storm brewing inside me. Each word I typed to them was measured, like a chess move. Every message I sent recorded. Every tone captured. Evidence for the day I would strike. Love these stories? Hit subscribe, smash like and tell us where you're watching from. That evening, I hired a private investigator. The idea was simple: document everything about their lavish, careless lives while they gossiped and bragged to friends. Every dinner, every purchase, every reckless word about the inheritance would be captured. I wanted receipts they could never deny. If they believed I was passive, that I would let greed outweigh respect, they were gravely mistaken. At home, I set up my own system, scanning the emails, letters, and notes my father had left. Each document, each photo, each signed statement became part of the arsenal. By bedtime, I reviewed everything again, smiling quietly. Their sense of control, their belief they could bully their way into the trust, was the very fuel I needed. The fire was lit. Soon, their arrogance would meet the consequences, and I would be ready to pull every string. Love these stories? Hit subscribe, smash like and tell us where you're watching from. The next morning, I sent an email to the family lawyer, carefully phrasing my request. I needed a full copy of my father's trust and all relevant documents, noting my brother's absence from the funeral. I knew the lawyer respected protocol but also loved clarity. Within hours, a digital copy landed in my inbox. I opened it slowly, savoring every page. Every clause, every signature, every stipulation was now mine to analyze. As I read, my plan took shape. My brothers assumed they could bully their way into the $850,000 trust. They didn't know the clause Dad had inserted: missing the funeral was a breach of respect that could affect distribution. I smiled at the foresight in his handwriting. Later, I discreetly shared small hints of my findings with a few close family friends. Their reactions, shock, disbelief, curiosity, spread quietly. Word would travel. By the time Michael and Jason realized what was happening, it would be too late. By evening, I had drafted letters to my brothers, not confrontational but precise, almost clinical. I wanted them worried, uneasy. My revenge had begun, and it was as silent and sharp as a scalpel. By the next morning, the first ripple of tension hit. My brothers, Michael and Jason, assumed their usual arrogance would intimidate the lawyer. But when they called demanding immediate access to the trust, the lawyer calmly reminded them of the clause about funeral attendance. The words hit harder than I could have hoped. Silence stretched over the phone line, and I imagined the color draining from their faces. I watched carefully, keeping my distance but listening. Michael's voice cracked with frustration. Jason's hand trembled as he slammed the phone down. They had never expected me to have both the courage and the evidence to enforce Dad's wishes. Their confidence, the kind that had let them walk over me for years, was cracking. That evening, I began compiling the receipts, messages, and video clips of their absence, filing them neatly into a folder titled Evidence. Each piece made my heart pound with quiet satisfaction. By the time I presented it, there would be no arguing. No begging. No clever excuses. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, about showing them that betrayal carried consequences. I was no longer the ignored daughter, I was the architect of their reckoning. The next morning, I arrived at Kyla Townsend's office with renewed determination. She was calm but sharp-eyed, already anticipating my next move. I laid out the evidence one by one: the missed funeral, the flippant texts demanding money, and the witnesses who could confirm their absence. Kyla nodded, her expression unreadable, then scribbled notes on her pad. "This," she said finally, "is more than enough to challenge their claim. We can file a formal notice today." My chest swelled with quiet triumph. For years, I had felt powerless. Now, power sat squarely in my hands. Later that afternoon, I watched as Kyla prepared the documents, each signature and seal making the reality more tangible. I felt a thrill I hadn't expected. Justice wasn't just an idea anymore, it was actionable. By evening, the formal notice had been delivered to Michael and Jason. I imagined their reactions as they opened it, the sharp sting of surprise, the realization that their arrogance had blinded them. No words could undo the facts now. For the first time, I felt the weight of control settling on me. The battlefield was set. The first move had been made. And I was ready for the fight. The next morning, I could almost feel the tremor running through Michael and Jason's household. Word of the formal notice had spread fast, and from what I heard, chaos had set in. Michael paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp with anger. Jason tried to calm him, but even he looked uneasy, fidgeting with the cuffs of his shirt. I wasn't there, of course, but Ashley, my neighbor and ally, had texted me updates in real time. "They're panicking," she wrote. "Michael just called their lawyer and ranted for 20 minutes. Jason looks pale." The thought made a small smile tug at my lips. For years, they had underestimated me, dismissed me as powerless, and ignored the rules of decency. Now, the tables were turning. They tried sending messages to intimidate me, claiming I had no legal grounds, that the trust fund was obviously theirs. I ignored them. Every text, every call, only strengthened my resolve. I had receipts, witnesses, and a meticulous lawyer on my side. For the first time, I felt untouchable. Their panic was my signal. The path to justice was no longer a dream. It was here, tangible, and unstoppable. I spent the morning going through every document, every email, and every message I could find. The betrayal was clearer than ever. Michael and Jason had planned to exclude me from Dad's trust from the start. Every casual forgetting at family dinners, every sly comment about me not understanding money, now made sense. Ashley helped me organize the evidence, turning chaos into clarity. Receipts of gifts I had funded, emails where my father explicitly mentioned my inheritance, even recordings of private conversations, everything was catalogued. My plan wasn't just about anger, it was about irrefutable proof. I also started speaking to longtime family friends who had quietly noticed the brothers' greed. One by one, they confirmed what I already knew. Their testimonies would matter when we presented the legal case. By midday, my confidence surged. Michael and Jason had built their lives on lies and entitlement. Now, every lie they told would be exposed, every sneer they gave me would come back to haunt them. I didn't just want my inheritance, I wanted justice, and more than that, a statement. No one treated Lilian Scott like she was invisible and got away with it. The game had begun. The players? Me, the brothers, and the truth. The day I filed the claim, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Michael and Jason received the notice at their office, their smug smiles fading as they read the words. They couldn't hide the shock, the first crack in their armor. The lawyer, Kyla Torres, was precise. "Your father's wishes were clear," she said, placing the documents on the table. "The trust includes Lilian Scott, and all actions to exclude her are invalid." Michael scoffed, trying to act casual, but I saw it, panic flickering behind his eyes. Jason muttered something about mistakes, but the evidence was undeniable. Every receipt, every email, every recorded conversation was laid out like a dam ready to break. I stayed calm, letting Kyla do the talking. I didn't need to argue. Their faces said it all: realization, fear, frustration. For the first time, they understood I wasn't powerless. As I left the office, I felt an unfamiliar satisfaction. The first legal move had been made. The brothers had underestimated me, assuming grief made me weak. They were wrong. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was reclaiming respect, dignity, and the legacy my father intended for me. The battle had begun. By the next morning, the tension was unbearable. Michael called repeatedly, leaving messages dripping with false concern. Jason sent texts pretending to reconsider their actions, but I didn't respond. I knew their words were hollow. The receipts and legal documents had stripped away any power they thought they had. That afternoon, I received a formal letter from their lawyer, demanding I reconsider my claims. They accused me of manipulation, greed, even dishonoring my father's memory. I read every word, heart steady, mind clear. Kyla laughed softly beside me. "They're panicking," she said. "Every claim you've made is backed by proof. They're running out of excuses." I reviewed the trust documents again, confirming every clause that protected me. Every email, every note, every witness statement was perfect. My father had been meticulous. He had left no loopholes. For the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. Their desperation was a warning, a confirmation that I was on the right path. They had thought grief made me weak, it had only sharpened me. The real test was coming. I had to anticipate their next move, and I knew it would be aggressive. But this time, I would be ready. By midweek, their desperation became clear. Jason attempted to manipulate our father's business contacts, subtly undermining my authority. Michael tried sending forged emails to sway the trustee, hoping to make me doubt myself. But I had anticipated every move. Kyla and I spent hours dissecting every action, cross-checking dates, emails, and witnesses. Every forged email was traced, every lie exposed. I began compiling a detailed file of their sabotage attempts, each page labeled and timestamped. This was no longer just about inheritance, it was about proving their true character. I contacted the trustee directly, calmly presenting evidence that any interference would be challenged legally. I am fully prepared to protect my father's intentions, I told him. Everything is documented. He nodded, a mix of relief and surprise on his face. Meanwhile, I informed my allies in the business, ensuring that no attempt at manipulation would succeed. Word of their underhanded tactics began to circulate quietly. That evening, I sat in the quiet of my father's study, reviewing the files. I realized that their aggression was the perfect proof I needed to turn the tables. Their greed was no longer a threat, it was my weapon. The weekend arrived, and my plan shifted into action. I knew their ego would force them into the spotlight, and I was ready. I arranged a casual gathering of family friends under the pretense of honoring Dad's legacy. Invitations went out carefully, making sure my half-brothers would be present. As expected, Jason and Michael arrived, dressed to impress, carrying their usual smug expressions. They didn't realize I had quietly shared a few key documents with trusted family friends beforehand, proof of their absence at Dad's funeral, their ungrateful remarks, and subtle attempts to manipulate the inheritance. When the topic of Dad's funeral came up, I calmly mentioned it, letting others recount their own experiences. Whispers started around the room as evidence was casually brought up, a text here, a photo there. Their faces went pale. They fumbled, tried to laugh it off, but the room had shifted. I watched silently, letting the shock settle in. Their arrogance had made them careless, and now it was their undoing. The first wave of public humiliation had begun, and I felt a surge of vindication. By the end of the evening, it was clear, I wasn't just fighting for inheritance, I was reclaiming respect. The following Monday, I contacted a top inheritance lawyer, someone known for taking cases where family betrayal and greed intersected. Her name was Cassandra Mills, sharp, meticulous, and fearless. I explained everything, Dad's trust, my half-brother's absence at the funeral, and their audacious demands the very next day. Cassandra listened carefully, asking the right questions. We need receipts, Lilian. Every message, every email, every witness. You can't just rely on emotion, you need leverage, she said. I handed over my carefully compiled evidence, screenshots of texts, videos from the funeral, and statements from relatives who had seen their blatant disrespect. She smiled knowingly. You've already done half the work. Now we structure the rest legally. They'll think they're untouchable until we hit them. The plan was precise. First, send a formal legal notice highlighting their failed obligations and Dad's stipulations. Second, demand mediation, backed by irrefutable proof. Third, prepare for court if they dared to challenge the trust unjustly. I felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. For once, my anger and sadness were transformed into power. The half-brothers had underestimated me, thinking I'd stay silent. They didn't know a storm was coming, one that would strip away their arrogance and reveal the truth. The day the legal notice arrived, I watched their world start to wobble. I had it delivered personally, making sure it landed directly in the hands of my half-brothers. Their faces changed the moment they read the first lines. Shock, disbelief, then panic. It was intoxicating to see their confidence crumble. They had assumed I would quietly accept their greed. They never considered that I had receipts, witnesses, and a skilled lawyer ready to dismantle their claims. The notice was clear. They had no standing for the trust's money unless they could justify their behavior, including showing respect at the funeral. Soon, calls started flooding me, angry threats, desperate pleas, and even attempts to negotiate behind the scenes. I stayed calm, taking notes, recording every interaction, letting them dig themselves deeper. Every word they said would become evidence, strengthening my case. By the evening, Cassandra called with updates. "They're panicking, Lilian. Their arrogance is unraveling, and we haven't even begun mediation. Keep your composure, your proof will do the talking." I leaned back, a small, satisfied smile on my face. For the first time in years, I felt I was in control. The betrayal that had haunted me was finally meeting its reckoning. By morning, I already knew they were scrambling. Lilian Scott didn't just wait for justice, she prepared for it. My half-brothers, realizing their arrogance had been exposed, tried every trick in the book. First came frantic calls from attorneys I had never met, demanding extensions, threatening lawsuits, trying to intimidate me. I answered none. I let every call record itself. Every misstep would count. Next, they attempted to sway the family elders, whispering lies about me, trying to paint me as unreasonable. I had anticipated this. I sent carefully worded updates to key family members, providing evidence of their disrespect at Dad's funeral. Photos, witness statements, and receipts of previous threats all documented. I was a step ahead. Then, the most predictable move, a rushed legal filing, claiming entitlement to part of the trust, hoping the court would act quickly before evidence could be properly presented. I calmly handed it to Kyla, my lawyer, who smiled knowingly. "They just handed us their weakness," she said. That evening, I reviewed every piece of evidence again. Their desperation only strengthened my position. The betrayal that had once hurt me now fueled a strategy they could never anticipate. Their greed would be their undoing. The next morning, I watched quietly as my half-brothers continued their chaotic attempts to manipulate the situation. Lilian Scott had no intention of being bullied or outmaneuvered. Every threat they made, every lie they whispered, I recorded, catalogued, and turned into ammunition. Their own words would betray them. Kyla, my lawyer, and I devised a plan to exploit their overconfidence. We submitted a countermotion highlighting their absence at Dad's funeral, their attempts to intimidate the family, and their repeated disrespect. I included timestamps, audio clips, photos, and signed witness statements, proof that couldn't be ignored. Every piece of evidence painted a clear picture. They were not just greedy but manipulative, dishonest, and untrustworthy. I also leaked carefully curated updates to select family members, showing the contrast between their actions and my respect for Dad's memory. Their anger, their frantic calls, their failed attempts to charm or intimidate, only strengthened my case. By afternoon, whispers started to spread. People began questioning their morality. And while they thought they were controlling the narrative, I was quietly controlling the court, the family, and their reputation. Their own greed and arrogance were the very weapons I now wielded to claim the justice Dad had intended. The courtroom was silent, but my heart raced with quiet satisfaction. Lilian Scott had prepared meticulously for this moment. I wore a simple black dress, confident and composed, while my half-brothers swaggered in, thinking charm and entitlement could sway anyone. They didn't realize that every step they took, every smug smile, would work against them. Kyla began presenting the evidence, audio recordings of threats, photos showing their absence at Dad's funeral, and documents proving their manipulative attempts to seize Dad's trust. Every detail was precise, irrefutable. The judge's eyes narrowed at each piece of proof, clearly impressed by the thoroughness. My brothers' faces went pale as the reality hit them. Every attempt to interrupt was countered with facts. Witnesses I'd quietly gathered testified to their greed, their lies, and their disrespect. They had assumed the court was a stage for their theatrics, but it was now a mirror reflecting their true character. I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak for me. The more they protested, the weaker they appeared. The power shift was undeniable. For the first time, I felt the weight of justice settling firmly in my hands. They had underestimated me, and now, the truth was unstoppable. The next day, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Lilian Scott had one last ace up her sleeve, the overlooked clause in Dad's trust. Kyla, my sharp lawyer, stood confidently before the judge, her eyes glinting with the thrill of a reveal. My half-brothers leaned forward, still believing their silver tongues could manipulate the outcome. Kyla carefully explained the trust's hidden clause. Dad had included a penalty for any heir who showed disrespect or abandonment during his final days. The clause was specific, binding, and irrefutable. Their absence from the funeral, their immediate demand for the inheritance, and the documented evidence of their greed triggered it perfectly. The judge paused, flipping through the pages, clearly stunned. "This clause, it's valid and enforceable," he said finally, and my heart soared. My brothers' faces drained of color, their smug confidence crumbled instantly. They had counted on intimidation and charm, never imagining the legal trap laid in plain sight. I felt a quiet, satisfying smile form. Every insult, every betrayal, every attempt to diminish me had led to this moment. The courtroom held its breath as the first signs of the inheritance shifting legally in my favor became undeniable. For once, I wasn't powerless. I was unstoppable. The courtroom was silent as the judge's gavel echoed, marking the moment the trust officially recognized the penalty clause. Lilian Scott, once ignored and belittled, now held the upper hand. My half-brothers' faces were pale, disbelief written across every line. The evidence, the receipts, the funeral absence, all combined into a verdict they never saw coming. Kyla handed me a copy of the amended trust ruling. My hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear, it was satisfaction, a rush of vindication that filled every corner of my being. Years of being dismissed, of feeling invisible in my own family, evaporated with that simple document. From this point forward, the judge announced, the assets of the trust will be distributed according to the conditions, penalizing heirs who failed to respect the decedent's final wishes. The room felt charged, like time had paused. My brothers murmured in panic, scrambling to find loopholes, but Kyla's meticulous preparation left none. Every receipt, every text, every video from the funeral was accounted for, proving the betrayal beyond question. For the first time in my life, I felt completely in control. The inheritance was no longer a distant dream, it was mine, and every ounce of their greed only strengthened the triumph I finally claimed. The morning sunlight streamed through the office windows, casting a golden glow over Lilian Scott's new domain. I walked past the polished desks and organized files, feeling the weight of years of frustration lift with each step. Today wasn't just about money, it was about control, respect, and reclaiming the life that had been stolen from me. Kyla had arranged everything perfectly. The legal documents were ready, the trust fully secured, and my brother's inability to comply with the funeral conditions had triggered the penalty clause. Every piece of evidence I had collected, from videos to emails to witnesses' statements, was validated. Their greedy faces haunted me no longer. I drafted letters to the family estate, announcing my official management of the assets. My brothers' calls went unanswered, their texts ignored. The public recognition of my role in the trust was both exhilarating and surreal. Ashley, my longtime friend and ally, stopped by with a bouquet of white lilies, a silent nod to the peace I was finally claiming. "You did it, Lilian," she whispered, smiling. I nodded, feeling tears threaten but refusing to let them fall. Victory wasn't just financial, it was personal, emotional, and irrevocable. I had turned betrayal into triumph, and now, life was finally mine to command. News of the trust's transfer spread faster than I anticipated. My half-brothers, who had flaunted entitlement and greed, were blindsided. Calls from relatives, neighbors, and even distant family poured in. Everyone wanted to know how Lilian Scott, ignored, belittled, and dismissed, had suddenly seized control of the $800,000 inheritance. Kyla handled the inquiries professionally, confirming the legality of every move while subtly exposing my brother's failures. Each time I saw their shocked expressions in private messages or family group chats, a flicker of satisfaction warmed me. They had treated me as irrelevant, yet here I stood, not only validated but empowered. Social media wasn't slow to react either. Posts circulated about their absence at the funeral, their greed, and my calculated legal comeback. Comments poured in, ranging from admiration for my composure to criticism of my brother's audacity. The evidence I had preserved became public proof. Every insult, every demand, every attempt to undermine me now worked in my favor. Even friends who had doubted my strength before now called, congratulating me on my patience and intelligence. For the first time, I felt truly recognized, not for my obedience or compromise, but for my courage, strategy, and unwavering resolve. Betrayal had been cruel, but revenge, executed carefully, tasted sweet. It didn't take long for my half-brothers to realize they were cornered. Calls, texts, and emails flooded my phone, all tinged with anger, guilt, and desperation. "Lilian, this isn't fair," one demanded. Another threatened legal action. Their arrogance had vanished, replaced by panic. I stayed calm, letting each message sit unanswered for hours, savoring the shift in power. Kyla advised me to document every interaction. Each desperate plea, each veiled threat became part of the growing record, a shield and a weapon. Their lawyer even tried to contact me, questioning the trust's legitimacy, but Kyla countered every point with airtight evidence and precedent. My brothers were floundering, trapped by their own greed. Meanwhile, I maintained my public composure. I smiled at family gatherings, attended community events, and subtly let others see the transformation. Lilian Scott, once overlooked, was now untouchable. Their attempts to intimidate me only strengthened my resolve. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. The very people who had skipped my father's funeral, expecting to inherit effortlessly, were now scrambling, powerless. Every move I had made was calculated, every response measured, and now the payoff, the sweet satisfaction of watching them falter, was becoming reality. Their desperation only confirmed one truth: control had shifted, entirely, to me. The day arrived. The day I would make every deceit, every insult, every slight impossible to ignore. I invited family, close friends, and a few key legal and financial advisors to a formal gathering at the estate. My half-brothers thought they were walking in to negotiate, maybe intimidate, but they had no idea what awaited them. I began by recounting the funeral incident, my voice steady, eyes unwavering. I displayed the messages, the calls, the evidence Kyla and I had compiled, proof of their disregard, entitlement, and greed. The room grew tense as murmurs rose. My brothers shifted uncomfortably, realizing for the first time that their schemes were transparent, their arrogance exposed. Then, I revealed the trust details. Their $800,000 expectation dissolved before everyone's eyes. Every clause, every contingency, every legal protection had been perfectly orchestrated. I had followed the law, but with precision that left them powerless. The satisfaction was intoxicating. Whispers of admiration and shock spread. They tried to protest, but even their lawyer could only shake his head. I had taken betrayal, frustration, and pain, and transformed it into a public, undeniable triumph. In that moment, I wasn't just the daughter or sister, they saw me as Lilian Scott, the woman who would never be underestimated again. After the final reveal, life felt different, lighter, freer, more mine. The weight of betrayal, the sting of being overlooked, had finally transformed into power and clarity. My half-brothers retreated, their arrogance replaced by cautious silence. No one questioned me anymore, respect had been earned the hard way. I spent the next weeks reorganizing the estate, ensuring everything was properly documented and secured. Every letter, every contract, every trust clause had been reviewed, leaving no room for future manipulation. Kyla continued guiding me, ensuring the legal foundation was rock solid, while I reconnected with friends who had stood quietly by me, offering encouragement and support. The emotional scars remained, yes, but they reminded me of the lessons learned: vigilance, patience, and the strength within. I could finally enjoy family gatherings without anxiety, hosting those who genuinely cared. My father's legacy, once threatened by greed, was now protected, cherished, and honored. As I stood in the garden one evening, watching the sunset, I smiled. Triumph was sweet, but freedom was sweeter. I had taken betrayal and turned it into justice, anger into strategy, and humiliation into empowerment. Lilian Scott had emerged stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. And this time, no one would ever forget it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.